Ever feel like
there's some kind of wisdom
hidden just beneath the surface?
of everything.
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of waiting to be uncovered. You sent in the Book of Wisdom, the self-published text by Revival of Wisdom.
Right.
And it
really dives headfirst into all these intriguing ideas.
Yeah.
What was it about this book that made you want to send it to us?
Well, I think the fact that it claims to pull from so many different traditions,
Right.
from esotericism to occultism and
It's this real blend of ideas,
Yeah.
which is pretty unique for a self-published work.
Yeah, that's true. It's like the author took all these ancient mysteries and threw them in a blender and said, here you go.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they claim to hold the key to unlocking 100% of our brains.
And understanding how our bodies are actually temples. But before we jump into all of that.
Can you give us a little bit of a rundown on what even is esotericism?
Sure.
What is it that makes this kind of wisdom so different?
So think of esotericism as this search for hidden knowledge, kind of like a deeper understanding of reality.
That goes beyond the everyday.
Right.
It's been around for centuries.
Woven through various cultures and traditions.
And I think because self-publishing bypasses traditional gatekeepers.
You often get these really unique, unfiltered perspectives.
So it's kind of like we're peeking behind the curtain
Yes.
of what's usually kept secret.
Exactly.
And this book seems to be pulling from all sorts of these hidden threads.
It does.
It mentions syncretism, the chakras, the pineal gland.
It's a lot to unpack.
It definitely is. And that's one of the things that makes this diptych so interesting.
Right.
Because it's not just one idea. It's like this whole web of them.
Yeah.
For example, syncretism,
Okay.
which is basically the idea of blending different belief systems, right?
Right.
This book does that by connecting ideas like the left and right brain to masculinity and femininity, logic and intuition.
So it's also taking these different ways of thinking and kind of mapping them onto the different parts of our brain.
Exactly.
And then it ties those to our physical bodies being temples.
Exactly. And that's where this whole idea of unlocking our potential comes in, right?
Okay.
The book argues that by tapping into these different aspects of ourselves, we can become more godlike.
Wow.
Which is a pretty bold claim.
Right.
And it's all connected to those temples that we're walking around in.
Which is interesting because that's something that you see echo across different cultures and traditions.
You do.
This idea that
we have this potential inside of us that is just waiting to be unlocked.
Speaking of which.
The book spends a lot of time talking about the chakras.
Yes.
What are those exactly? How would you describe them?
So the book describes them as energy centers.
Okay.
Almost like these mini brains.
That are running along your spine.
There are 7 of them. And they're each associated with different aspects of our being.
Okay.
Physical, emotional, spiritual. Now, where it gets really interesting is the claim that
by balancing these chakras, we can actually influence our reality.
Right.
You mean like manifesting things?
That's exactly what the book suggests.
Wow, okay.
And this is something that you see in various esoteric traditions.
Yep.
This book really leans into it.
That is a deep dive,
It is.
if I've ever heard one.
Yeah.
So how does this all connect to the pineal gland? Because that's in here too, right?
It is.
The book calls the pineal gland the seat of consciousness.
Okay.
Literally.
It suggests that this tiny gland nestled deep within our brains is how we access these higher realms of existence.
Okay.
It even suggests that it's the key to experiencing the astral plane.
The astral plane, see, now that's a term I've heard whispered in hushed tones,
Right.
but never really understood what is that exactly.
So imagine a dimension beyond our physical reality,
okay.
a realm of pure thought and energy.
It's a concept that you see pop up in a lot of different mystical traditions.
Right.
It's often associated with things like out-of-body experiences, dreams.
Now, while the pineal gland does produce melatonin,
Right.
which helps regulate sleep, the idea of it acting as some kind of portal.
To other dimensions is where we might want to tread
A
carefully.
healthy dose of skepticism never hurt. But before we get into that.
One of the things that really struck me about this book is the imagery.
Right.
It's packed with symbols and diagrams.
Yes.
For a self-published work.
Yeah.
In fact, it even mentions using
Edited and AI-generated images.
Right.
It makes you think about the thought process behind all of that.
Absolutely. And it just shows how accessible these tools have become.
Right.
But going back to those symbols.
They're not just pretty pictures.
Right.
The book uses them as a way to unlock these deeper layers of meaning. For example, it equates Christ oil to cerebrospinal fluid.
Wow.
And the way it moves through the body is connected to biblical events.
So what's the significance of linking something like cerebrospinal fluid?
To the story of Christ.
Well, the book seems to be suggesting some kind of deeper symbolic connection there, right?
Okay.
For example, it compares the cerebrospinal fluid's journey from the brain down the spine to God descending from heaven.
Okay.
And get this.
Jacob's ladder is actually the spinal cord,
Wow.
according to the Book of Wisdom.
So it sounds like the author really wants us to see the human body itself
Yes.
as this source of hidden wisdom.
It's not just the cerebrospinal fluid
They even draw a parallel between the tree of life.
and the cardiovascular system,
Right.
as if our blood flow carries some deeper significance.
What do you make of this kind of...
Intricate web of symbolism.
It definitely gets you thinking, doesn't it?
And that's where the line between correlation and causation is important to remember.
What do you mean?
You know, just because two things seem to happen in similar ways doesn't mean that one actually causes the other.
Right.
For example, the book suggests that we can unlock 100% of our brains.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
But neuroscience shows us that we already use all parts of our brains.
We just don't use them all at the same time.
So maybe it's a little more nuanced than the book makes it out to be.
It seems that way.
And while many cultures throughout history have given a lot of spiritual weight to the pineal gland,
Right.
science hasn't really caught up with those beliefs.
So how do we reconcile all these different perspectives? Because you've got tradition
You've got this potential for unlocking hidden abilities inside ourselves.
and this intricate symbolic language.
Where do we even begin to make sense of this?
It's like we're trying to decipher a secret code or something. You've got all these really intriguing ideas, figuring out what they mean for us.
How we apply them to our lives.
That's the real challenge.
It's definitely a journey,
Mhm.
and like any good journey, it's not always about the destination, right?
True
It's
that.
about that.
Process of discovery.
So just embracing that sense of curiosity
Exactly.
and wonder is kind of the key here.
Yeah, and that's where a critical lens can be helpful.
No.
Not to dismiss these ideas, but to look at them thoughtfully.
Right.
For example, the book talks about the body as a temple.
Yeah.
And while we might not all interpret those biblical stories in the same way,
Right.
that idea of caring for ourselves,
Both physically and mentally is something we can all connect with.
it's like that saying, you are what you eat.
But maybe a little more holistic.
Right.
You are what you think and feel and believe.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And that actually brings us back to the chakras.
Yeah.
While the scientific community might not agree on their existence as these literal energy centers,
Okay.
the practices that are often associated with balancing your chakras,
Like meditation or yoga have very real benefits for a lot of people.
and that speaks to that mind-body connection.
It's like the placebo effect.
But on like a much larger scale.
Right.
If you really believe in something.
It can create tangible change.
Absolutely. Our beliefs really do shape our realities in really powerful ways.
Right.
So as we're kind of going through these esoteric concepts,
It's less about, is this right or wrong? And more about what feels true to me.
okay.
It's about that personal resonance.
So not just blindly accepting,
Exactly.
but finding what resonates for you,
Yes, exactly.
finding your own meaning in it.
I like that. And it's kind of like how...
You know, ancient cultures used myths and symbols to explain the universe, right?
Right.
And those stories were open to interpretation.
They invited people to find their own personal truth within them.
Right.
This book seems to be doing something very similar.
So they're giving us the map.
But we get to choose our path.
Exactly.
And we might find ourselves drawn to different symbols. For
Right.
example, I was really interested in that comparison.
Between the brain's two hemispheres
Yes.
and the Masonic pillars.
Oh, right. The idea that the left brain, with logic and analysis, is like one pillar.
Right.
And the right brain, with its intuition and creativity, is the other.
And the book seems to argue that modern society has become a little too left brain dominant,
Right.
that we're neglecting the wisdom and the insight.
That comes from the right brain.
It's an interesting thought.
Do you think that's why these esoteric ideas?
Are often seen as being fringe or taboo
It's possible.
because they challenge that dominant way of thinking.
Yeah, esoteric traditions have always been kind of veiled in secrecy,
Right.
passed down through certain groups.
Maybe that air of mystery.
Just makes them more appealing.
Just like we're fascinated by the unknown,
Yeah.
by those little whispers.
Of hidden truth
Exactly.
and that desire to discover.
That's probably what drew you to this book to begin with.
Right, exactly.
So, to all of you listening,
What was it about the Book of Wisdom that made you want to pick it up?
and what were you hoping to find in its pages?
How has this deep dive so far maybe changed how you look at these ideas.
Have any of them resonated with you in unexpected ways?
Because that's the great thing about thought-provoking material.
It's not about having all the answers laid out in front of you.
It's about asking those questions.
And seeing the world in a new light.
Yes. It's about igniting that sense of wonder.
And the Book of Wisdom.
With its mix of ancient traditions.
And its bold claims about unlocking our hidden potential.
It definitely does that.
Yeah.
But how exactly does it suggest that we tap into that potential?
That's where things get really interesting. The book basically says that by understanding these hidden connections between our bodies, our minds, the entire universe.
That's how we can access a higher level of consciousness and unlock our true capabilities.
So it's not enough to just read about it. We actually have to apply it.
Exactly.
But how do we know
which ideas to embrace?
And which ones to maybe approach with a little more caution?
That's where I think discernment comes in.
Okay.
You know, trusting your intuition.
Exploring different practices.
And figuring out what feels right for you.
So again, it's about that personal journey.
Exactly.
And that journey is going to be different for everybody.
Right.
There's no right or wrong way to approach spirituality or any of these esoteric ideas.
So it sounds like the Book of Wisdom
is less of a rule book.
And more of a springboard.
Yes.
To propel us.
Into this deeper exploration of all these concepts.
I like that.
It's about diving into the deep end.
Deeper waters.
Right.
Filled with chakras and...
the mysteries of the pineal gland.
And maybe even a bit of Christ oil.
A little Christ oil to guide our way. Exactly. It's like we're all on this quest for the Holy Grail.
But instead of a cup, it's this hidden wisdom.
I like that.
And just like those legendary quests.
The path is rarely linear. It's going to have all those twists and turns along the way.
Always does.
Speaking of twists and turns.
One of the things that I found really interesting about this book
is its interpretation of these biblical stories.
What do you mean?
Well, like how it connects.
Christ oil.
Okay.
Or cerebrospinal fluid.
Right.
Passing the 33 vertebrae of the spine.
Right.
To Jesus being crucified at age 33.
Right.
Or the cerebrospinal fluid pooling at the base of the spine.
To his 3 days in the tomb.
Right.
I mean, whether you take those literally or not.
It paints such a vivid picture.
It does.
It's like the author is saying,
hey, this ancient wisdom.
It's not some abstract concept.
Right.
It's happening inside of you right now.
And that's a powerful message.
Right.
It reminds us that we're not separate from these ancient traditions.
Right.
These universal truths.
They're part of who we are.
It's like know thyself
like
on a whole other level.
Right.
But with all this information.
All this symbolism.
How does the book suggest we actually apply it? Like, what does it look like?
To understand our bodies as temples.
That's where things get really interesting.
And it's definitely something we need to explore further.
Okay.
The book has a really unique perspective on how we can actually apply these concepts to unlock our potential and live more fulfilling lives.
But before we get into that,
I want to hear what you think about this one example of symbolism from the book.
Okay.
It connects the pineal gland to all these ancient myths and spiritual practices.
Ooh, that sounds like a story for the ages.
It is.
Let's take a quick pause.
And then we'll come back and unravel that thread a little more.
Sounds good.
All right, so before the break, we were talking about some of the symbols in the Book of Wisdom.
Right.
And you mentioned a connection
between the pineal gland,
yes,
ancient myths,
and spiritual practices.
Right.
What's the story there?
So the book makes this point that the pineal gland has been revered for centuries.
By cultures all over the world,
right,
for example.
In ancient Egypt, they associated it with the Eye of Horus,
right,
which was a symbol of intuition and spiritual awakening.
Right.
And in Hinduism,
it's often linked to the Ajna chakra, the third eye,
which is believed to be related to intuition and higher consciousness.
So even if science doesn't totally get it,
right,
the pineal gland has always been seen as kind of this source of
mystical experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Book of Wisdom draws on that,
right,
suggesting that if we tap into these ancient practices,
maybe we can unlock something in ourselves too.
It's like they're saying,
just because we don't have all the answers doesn't mean there's no wisdom there.
Right. Maybe we need to approach this stuff with a little more curiosity.
Right.
And maybe that'll help us bridge the gap
between ancient wisdom and what we know today.
Finding that balance.
Yes.
And the book also talks about balancing
our left and right brain.
Yes, it does.
It says that we're too focused on logic.
Right.
On analysis.
That we're neglecting the more intuitive side.
Right, that creativity that comes with the right side of the brain.
It's like we've forgotten about all the colors.
Exactly.
We're just seeing black and white.
And the colors are where the beauty is.
Right.
The nuances, that's where the wisdom is.
So it's not about abandoning logic.
No, not at all.
It's just acknowledging
that there are other ways.
Yes, absolutely.
Looking at things.
There's so many different perspectives.
And maybe if we can kind of bring those together,
we can better understand who we are.
Exactly.
What we're capable of.
It's about that integration.
Right.
Bringing those different sides together.
And I think that's really
the core of
the Book of Wisdom
was trying to do.
It's not about giving you all the answers. It's about sparking that.
Curiosity.
That wonder.
That's what it's all about.
It's about going on that journey.
Yes.
To find those.
Uncover
those hidden truths. Exactly.
And the answers are already within us.
We just have to
be open to finding them.
Yes. Be open to the possibility.
That's a great place to end it.
And to all of you listening.
We want to hear your thoughts.
On the Book of Wisdom.
What really resonated with you?
What did you learn?
Did anything surprise you?
Head over to our website.
Leave us a message.
You might even hear your thoughts on a future episode.
We love hearing from you.
Until next time.
Keep searching for those hidden truths.
Keep asking those questions.